A few weeks back, a lady contacted me for some help with her daughter, who has juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. And I've consulted with her and followed her story closely. As if having a suffering child isn't bad enough, she also has to contend with the despicable, intimidating behaviour of a certain rheumatologist who's trying to force her daughter to take their toxic pills when her mum wants to go the natural route. She's now embroiled in legal wranglings to stop her daughter possibly even getting taken away, to the point that she has almost no time to devote to her own child's healing. She's down to an hour or two's sleep per night with worry and is basically in hell. This is my message to that rheumatologist and others who might be caught in the same mindset. You should be ashamed of yourselves. I've documented my own struggles with rheumatologists in detail in my book, Arthritis, the Best Thing That Ever Happened to Me, so I'm totally aware of how they operate, as do so many egotistical, close-minded docs in other fields such as endocrinology and oncology. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not some crank who's universally against doctors and modern medicine. There are some brilliant doctors in trauma care and surgery, and even some of the legalized drug peddlers, as I like to call them, are waking up and finally becoming the great doctors they dreamed of being and actually healing their patients. But more on them later. First, I want to explore who is the dangerous quack here. The rheumatologist or me, and those like me, whether doctors or laymen, who have found the same info via independent research. Well, let's just put this in the context of the bigger picture to start with. It's accepted in some quarters that medical mistakes and drugs correctly prescribed account for the third most common cause of death in the US and probably the world. To me, it's irrelevant to argue about the exact figures here, because the two leading causes of death, heart disease and cancer, are also largely down to the terrible diet advice and chemotherapy respectively. So let's chalk those down to doctors and conventional diet experts too. Whatever the numbers, in my consults I regularly see people terribly damaged by over-medication and a lack of lifestyle advice. And I see them heal as they lose the meds and get educated about the real causes of disease. So I'd say that however you look at it, the modern medical system is responsible for a massive amount of suffering. Let's bring that back to the case in hand. I'm sure that the rheumatologist in question would scoff at my approach and call me a quack for suggesting that diet and lifestyle changes could alter the course of an autoimmune disease. I've been scoffed at many times before, even when I went back to show my rheumatologist that I had reversed my own rheumatoid arthritis, and fatty liver with cysts, and IBS, and kidney stones, and arterial calcifications, and a long list of other issues, all of which I was told were incurable. When I tried to show him that I'd healed, he shouted even louder at me to take his poisons and doubled down on the fear-mongering, saying if I didn't comply, it would get into my heart and lungs and kill me. 9 years later, I'm still here, still healthy and med-free. And he's been sacked from that hospital for incompetence, even by their warped standards. Rheumatology is actually one of the most useless branches of medicine. Astonishingly, it's an area where you find doctors who don't know what causes arthritis and don't know how to cure it. Let that sink in for a moment. They don't know what causes arthritis and they don't know how to cure it. If you called a plumber in to fix a leaky pipe and he said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what caused it and I don't know how to fix it," would you pay him? And how would you feel if he also then tried to bully you via the courts into using his services in the future? Let's look at what rheumatology has to offer arthritics. There are the very dangerous steroids, lifesavers in acute conditions, but deadly long term. Then there are the biologics, horrible substances that cause all sorts of physiological chaos, and methotrexate, the one I'll deal with here, as that's what's being forced on this poor little girl. The side effects are numerous and listed on the package inserts. It's not my opinion. They're not rare either. I've come across many of them in my clients. Would anyone who loved their child willingly let them take a medicine that might cause anything from vomiting, diarrhea and hair loss to retinal detachment and serious liver damage. I wouldn't. I mean, it might be acceptable short term if it was a cure, but it never is. If you're lucky, it might bring down the symptoms short term at a great cost, but usually it doesn't, as the many online groups show, with thousands of people still in agony who are already taking these meds and posting photos of their inflamed joints, as well as suffering from the effects of the meds themselves. It's easy to get thrown off these groups too for even suggesting that there's a natural cure, because these poor people have been brainwashed by the arrogant rheumatologists that there is no cure, just because they have never seen anyone cured with their barbaric practices. The rheumatologists in turn are also brainwashed because in their experience, and via the dogma of the med schools and the drug companies, that's what they've been told. They also tell people that diet will do no good. Well, that's hardly surprising since they only have a day or two of training in diet during their whole 7 years or so of med school. And then it's the wrong training in diet. The old 5 a day, low fat, high fibre, calories in, calories out rubbish. It's too much to go into here, but if in doubt, check out my previous video, Vernon Coleman, You Are Wrong About Meat, where I explain the total corruption of diet science and give plenty of links. There is actually one semi-useful thing that rheumatologists could do for people, and that's to prescribe low-dose naltrexone, a relatively safe drug with a long history of efficacy, but they don't because the patent has run out, so it doesn't make money for their puppeteers, the drug companies, who want to push their latest revolting cocktail and make billions. Actually, nobody would even need low-dose naltrexone if they did everything else right, but at least giving LDN to their patients, the rheumatologists would be almost adhering to their Hippocratic oath, first do no harm, which they seem to have totally disregarded, judging by the damage I see caused by their toxic interventions every day in my clients. Yes, I totally understand that there are some charlatans out there in the natural health field selling all sorts of snake oil, but I would ask you to have some discrimination in this, just as I do when looking at the medical system. There is good and there is very, very bad in both. Don't lump all alternative practices together, especially since many of those practices are the original centuries-old techniques, and rheumatology and its like are the new practices, based not on a desire to heal, but on the repeat business model of disease management brought in as a monopoly by the Rockefellers over 100 years ago. Again, there's too much to go into about that here, but if you don't know where your profession originated, I suggest it's time for some proper research. You are the new kids on the block here, and you're not doing very well. Now let's compare my approach with the rheumatology approach of making a diagnosis and throwing the same chemical at everybody after an impersonal 10-minute consultation. Some wag once pointed out, if you're sitting on a nail, don't take an aspirin for the pain, get off the nail. We need to look back to ancestral times and find out what people were doing differently when they had no such chronic diseases. No, I'm not a doctor, but I'm definitely a leading expert in what those mitochondrial disruptors are and how to take them out of people's lives. When no longer confused, the body has systems in place to heal itself, and it does. In fact, the human body is the only thing that can cure any of these modern diseases. It's not me, and it's certainly not rheumatologists. To pretend otherwise is arrogant and dishonest. Whereas rheumatologists have never seen anyone reverse an autoimmune condition drug-free, I see people doing it day in and day out. So who is the quack now? Between my research, my paid consultations, and being available to people 24/7 for free online, I work many more hours than rheumatologists do, and I earn just about enough to just about pay my bills, if I'm lucky, whereas you are handsomely paid. I sell no pills, potions or powders. I have no backing from big pharma companies, so I have no massive financial incentive to do this. I'm just mopping up the damage you guys do every day, and my reward comes from the many testimonials I get as people finally find their way back to health. When did you last even get one of those? I can also honestly say that I've never done any harm. No client of mine has ever had retinal detachment or liver damage, or any other adverse effects past the usual slight challenges in the adaptation phase as the body adjusts to burning ketones and/or releases plant toxins such as oxalates. I have many tools in the toolbox apart from diet, but to use diet to illustrate, whereas doctors only have those couple of days of study, I've been studying it for 40 years, and I was wrong for 32 of them. Such is the misinformation one has to wade through. I still study hours every day, improving my knowledge and still looking for where I might be wrong. The opposite of the medical model, where they sneer at anyone disagreeing with them, assume they're always right, dismiss natural successes as spontaneous remissions, and call anyone not dealing with their brand of drugs a quack. Is there any wonder that we who have healed don't go and see you guys, so you seldom see the healing stories? We're sick of your close-minded arrogance. I'm often accused of relying on my own experience and unreliable anecdotes, but these days one cannot ignore the anecdotes anymore. They number in the tens of thousands of people who have healed, and that's just on the carnivore and keto diet Facebook groups. As Dr. Sean Baker says, the plural of anecdotes is data, and you can find so many of them at his MeetRx website too, plus links to enough studies to keep you occupied for a long time. On the subject of good doctors, I'm not alone in this knowledge. So many honest medical professionals have found the same as I have and are risking their careers to bring this knowledge to their patients and the world at large, finally doing some real good. A small list of some of the docs, researchers and nutritionists who have looked beyond their narrow training, seen through the corrupt studies and are getting real results include Ted Naiman, Ivor Cummins, Jack Cruz, Nadia Ali, Paul Saladino, David Unwin, Joanne McCormack, Paul Mabry, László Boros, Natasha Campbell-McBride, Paul Mason, Alvin Dannenberg, Gary Fetke, Sean O'Mara, Guy McPherson, Craig Emmerich, Gabrielle Lyon, Kevin Stock, Asim Malhotra, Jamie Seaman, Zoe Harkham, Brett Scher, Ben Bickman, and many more. You have the wonderful Dr. Ken Berry, author of The Lies My Doctor Told Me, who said on a recent podcast that he's doing what he does now to apologize to all the people he harmed with his standard medical school interventions. Then there's Dr. Zsofia Clements and her husband, Dr. Csaba Tóth, from Paleomedicina in Hungary, who are showing conclusively via gut permeability tests that the gut can never truly heal if there is any plant matter left in the diet, and all manner of chronic conditions are reversible on fully carnivore diets. These are the true pioneers, some of whom have become personal friends and who you really should be researching. If you haven't figured out the connection between gut health and autoimmunity yet, you really need to get your heads out of the sand. So, Dr. Ooh, I wish I could name you, but I'll resist for now. Lose the Dunning-Kruger effect where your expertise stops you realizing what an idiot you're being. Do some proper research and leave this poor lady's family alone. Respect her wishes and allow her some breathing space and energy to actually focus on her daughter's healing rather than fighting you off. I'm sick of spending more time dealing with the stress and panic you're causing than actually getting down to some proper work with her and her daughter. This lady has my full support, and through me access to some cutting-edge medical experts with knowledge that you never even dreamed of. I'll put some links in the video description. Lose your ego and check them out. Really, this message goes out to any rheumatologist also using these criminal techniques of intimidation to split up families and poison children. Tragically, those techniques are not considered criminal as such because of our ridiculous laws, but to me there is nothing more criminal than harming a child, and that's what you're doing. Wake up.